What if the headlines you see today became the thrillers you couldn't put down tomorrow? My amazing guest for today, Rosa Linda Román, knows exactly how that happens because she's lived it. She's an Emmy-nominated journalist, a William Randolph Hearst award-winning reporter, a podcaster, and now the author of the gripping Catalina's Chronicles thriller series. Drawing from real-life corruption, crime, and conspiracies, she crafts stories so chilling and authentic they feel like they're ripped from the news. But today we're going to go beyond the headlines to uncover the real stories, the hidden dangers, and the secrets behind her high-stakes fiction. Plus, we'll talk about her incredible life writing books while living on a catamaran with her family. Authors like you've never heard them before, only on Books with Bridgetti. Don't go away. We'll be right back.
Introducing Books with Bridgetti, a lineup of industry experts, award-winning authors, and talented indie authors. Buckle up for an unparalleled journey with us. Meet exceptional authors celebrated globally for their captivating narratives. Our authors craft imaginative stories that stay etched in your mind long after the final page. It's not just stories, it's lingering experiences that stay etched in your mind. Our authors share the inspirations that create mesmerizing page-turning stories. Journeys that embody resilience, that turn setbacks into stepping stones, rejections that spark growth, and hurdles that become a catalyst for creativity. From dramas, mysteries, fantasies, children's stories to reality stories, join us as we delve into the inspiration behind the story, discover how authors breathe life into characters, and meticulously craft plots that keep you turning the page. But wait, there's more. We share stories from indie authors as well as Amazon and New York Times best-selling authors. Get ready for an interview that'll have you on the edge of your seat. Stay tuned. Join us, only on Books with Bridgetti.
Welcome back. If you're just joining us, you're watching Books with Bridgetti, and our live stream is made possible by StreamYard and Be Live Media. Our amazing guest today is none other than Rosa Linda Román. Authors like you've never heard them before, only on Books with Bridgetti. Now, if you've never heard about my amazing guest yet, or you don't know her yet, Rosa Linda is an Emmy-nominated William Randolph Hearst award-winning TV news reporter turned podcaster, live streamer, and author. She crafts chilling, real-life news stories into gripping conspiracy thrillers, making her Catalina's Chronicles series unmissable for fans of investigative suspense. However, the only person who can really share what she's all about is Rosa Linda herself. So let me give her a hearty welcome to the show, shall we? Rosa Linda, welcome. I am absolutely delighted to welcome you onto Books with Bridgetti, and I can't wait to dive in. You've been a guest on the show before, so it's fantastic to have you back again. And before we know it, time passes by so quickly. So if you don't mind, I'm going to jump right in with the questions so we can get this conversation going, if that's okay.
Absolutely. Let's go.
I'm going to start off with the dilemma that you had with Amazon.
Oh, okay.
You've had to move the release date because of the Amazon boycott. And I tend to believe that this was not just the scheduling tweak, I'm going to say it was a bold statement. Walk me through the moment when you realized you had to make that call. Was it a gut decision, a strategic move, or Was there something that pushed you over the edge towards that?
Yeah. So first of all, thank you for letting me be here. I love your show and I love being on it. So thank you for that. Yeah, it's an interesting situation. I'm in the middle of what is known as a rapid release of my trilogy. I have 3 books that are being released 1 month apart, essentially. One in January, which was the first book, Death Wounds. Then the next one is supposed to come out. I had scheduled it months ago on February 28th. Pyro was supposed to come out on Friday. And then the third one comes out at the end of March, Lethal Bonds. So it was already predetermined. The pre-order was up for quite some time already. And if people don't know, a pre-order means you go into Amazon, you buy the book ahead of time. But the problem is all of those sales happen on launch day. So because I had picked launch day as the 28th, that meant that everybody that bought my book already, they may have bought it in January, the actual sale would go through on the 28th. I felt like the more I started seeing on social media, and many of my friends and family were choosing not to buy anything on Friday the 28th, that posed a dilemma. They've already bought the book. They could cancel the order, certainly, but I felt like most people don't know that the order would go through on that date. And so ethically, I felt that it would not be fair to impose that on somebody else, make them buy something if they happen to choose to participate in the boycott. It really isn't my choice to make for them. I mean, I guess I could have, but I did not feel comfortable with that. So I looked into what would it take to move the launch date. I could have pushed it back to say March 1st or a week later. The problem is Amazon has these things, the algorithm basically rewards and punishes authors in certain ways and content creators in general. If you push back a pre-order, so if I say, well, I'll just do it on March 5th, then it teaches Amazon that you might be unreliable. And then potentially that extra push that they give you as an author, and they start to show people your book and say, where you see like suggested authors, suggested books, I might get punished if I had pushed it back that way. So then that left me with the only logical thing was to do it a day early or do it early. I was already, by the time I found out about the boycott, I only had a day and 20 minutes. It came down to a day and 20 minutes left to upload my manuscript and get all the last minute details done. So by pushing it back a day, I had 19 minutes to get everything done, but it successfully went through. So now the launch date is the 27th instead of the 28th.
Wow. Well done on making that call. Now, while indie authors are very reliant on Amazon, I also feel that this boycott somehow flipped the script. What do you think that this says about the power or the vulnerability of authors in today's publishing world? And if you had to redo this, would you make the same call?
Well, because I'm a new novelist, I am learning from the people who have paved the way before me. And the thing that I'm learning is a lot of authors, because of that vulnerability, a lot of the independent authors are choosing to go wide, as they say. And what that means is you may have your ebook on Amazon, but you may put your paperback in many other places. So there's different platforms. I have never done that yet because so far all my eggs are in the Amazon basket because I'm new to this. But I do think as authors mature and they put out more books, they start to get their own readers, their own followers, and then they are able to go wide, and people will look for their books and they'll say, oh, I'll go check out their website or I'll go to these other places. It's a little bit of a challenge because with the traditional publishers, they have a little bit more reach and they aren't limited to just Amazon or one platform. And we're creating that ourselves, which I think is fantastic. Having come from the mainstream, media, I love the fact that I get to do this myself. It also makes me pull my hair out sometimes because, when things go wrong, you don't have a publisher or someone else to blame or to troubleshoot for you. So.
Absolutely. Well, let's take a dive into your actual book, shall we?
Okay, we shall.
If Catalina Cruz had to write a novel about you, what do you think the title would be, and what shocking twist would readers never see coming?
About me?
Yes.
Oh, so my main character is writing about me, huh? Interesting.
Yes.
Well, I guess if she was talking about me, she'd talk about a lot of the stories that I wrote about in her books. All of the foundation of what are in my thrillers comes from stories that I've covered. I was a television news anchor and reporter at TV stations around the country before I decided to become a full-time mom in 2005. And I was a beat reporter for most of my career, so I covered some really awful, heinous crimes. And I started writing almost as therapy, as a way to process some of what I had seen. I started as a screenwriter. This book that came out in January, Death Wounds, was written as a screenplay first. It was maybe something they wouldn't have seen coming is it made the top 5 of the New York International Latino Film Festival. It was requested by Spike Lee's production company, as a matter of fact, and I never sent it because I was very young and insecure and unsure, and I was focused on my TV news career at the time. So I now converted that screenplay into this first novel, and then from that it's leaped into the trilogy. Maybe another thing they wouldn't have expected is that I live frequently on catamarans, sailing or otherwise. A motor cat is what we have right now, with my family, 3 kids and a German Shepherd, and my husband and I live on various boats and sail around. So that's kind of unique.
Absolutely, and it's fantastic. Now, as a seasoned journalist turned thriller author, where do you draw the ethical line? Have you ever uncovered a real story that you felt was so dark or dangerous that you decided to walk away?
I can see why people choose to use pen names, because there is a certain when you're writing stories, you do worry about who you might impact. I believe that we have to all be aware of our impact on others as much as we can. It's been an interesting journey to go from only telling things factually as a reporter, and even my my book on living on the catamaran, which is this is the book here behind me, called Losing Sight of the Shore, How to Live on a Boat Without Killing Your Family. That's all fact-based as well. So having a nonfiction book, doing live streams and podcasts about our real experiences, that was all fact-based. And so making the leap and really moving into fiction did take a lot of soul searching and deciding, but in the end, it's actually really fun, because I get to make up characters, and I get to take a seed of something that happened, but then take off with it in a different direction and make it something else. So Death Wounds is a perfect example. When I first was a reporter in South Georgia, in Valdosta, Georgia, there was a local sheriff who had been arrested and had gone through a trial for stockpiling military surplus property for his own private militia. And I didn't really cover that trial, but I was coming into this market at that time. And so I was like, that's so crazy that could happen. Well, all these years later, this is, 25 years later, I I turned that into a novel, and it's a fiction. It's a work of fiction, but it gets your brain thinking, and you have these visceral experiences that you then can put into this thriller. So it's been fun, actually.
Wow.
It's a lot more fun writing the fiction about a terrible thing than actually covering the terrible thing personally.
I can well imagine, you know. So your books expose power, corruption, conspiracy, and I want to ask, if you had to go full undercover journalist to research your next novel, what role would you play, and what real world mystery would you risk everything to expose?
Interesting. Well, this book, the second book, is actually based on something like that. I covered a story in Phoenix when I was a reporter at the Fox station in Phoenix, and it was just really gut-wrenching to cover this story. A family had been murdered, and the person who was allegedly responsible was the father of the family, and he escaped. And we covered the manhunt, and we covered, it was actually one of the scariest things I've ever covered, because we were in a remote community in the mountains in Arizona, and staying in a tiny little cabin, thinking this guy could come in at any time. I mean, this is the guy that just killed his family, and now potentially, here I am without any security or anything. All of this to say that he got away, and he made America's top most wanted, and he's never been found. It was a man named Robert Fisher. So if I had that kind of investigative tendency, it would be amazing to try to find him. But the best minds, in the FBI and the local sheriff and all of it, everybody's tried to find this guy. So I wish I could find, a way to pursue that, but this is my way to keep the story alive. The book is actually dedicated to the memory of the victims in that story. And I guess that's all we can do as individuals is, tell the story as we can. For me, telling it in a fiction way may spark somebody to look into it in the real world.
Who knows? You never know what it could spark.
Yeah.
Now, you've covered so many real life tragedies and conspiracies. Have you ever felt this is too close to home? I can't write about this. Has anything ever made you feel that way?
Yeah, there's a lot of things that make you feel that way. And I think that's part of why when I had children, I had to leave the mainstream business, because I was, main anchor in Monterey, California at that point. And it's one thing when you're a young person who, I didn't have kids, and I'm going on these scenes, and I'm very much, you think that you're invincible when you're younger. And then once you have children, you see, oh, okay, yeah, I actually have something really important and meaningful that is more important to me than my job, more important to me than anything. It would be keeping them safe and not putting us in dangerous situations. So yeah, it's a very different experience than when I was younger. So yeah, I think that it's when you get to that point where you're aware of your own mortality that I think these stories, they have a deeper meaning, but yeah, it's a little harder when you get older, I think. I have great respect for people who go into war zones. I have great respect for people, journalists I know that our society talks about how many terrible, horrible journalists and unethical people, and they're, they have their own agenda. That may be true, but there are also a lot of people who are putting themselves on the line to cover stories and to get the word out there, and not for infotainment, but for actual trying to be balanced and trying to be fair and trying to get the story out so that we can be informed. I really do think there are more good journalists than bad journalists in my experience. I've worked at TV stations around the country, and I would say there were a handful that I was like, okay, they do not have ethics. But most journalists that I have been around very much want to get it right.
Yeah, I can well imagine, and you've experienced some extraordinary things, both in your news reporting, and also now in your fiction writing. Is there anything that you think is so wild that you experienced in real life that people would never believe it if you had to put it in a book?
That's a good question. I mean, there are a lot of stories, but most of them do make the news. I was thinking about that because as I get into the next series after this one, I will probably tap into new stories or old stories that I hadn't revisited. A lot of it is just man's inhumanity to man. The things that I covered, I certainly covered a lot of just accidents and tragedies, child drownings, that kind of thing, where it was just heartbreaking any way you look at it. But there are some stories that still haunt me. There's one with there was a man. See, I'll just cry. So there was a man who bit his little boy's thumb off because he was on drugs, and he bit his thumb off. And I always think about like that kind of story, those things that you just can't fathom how somebody could do something to someone who they're supposed to be protecting and loving. And especially now that I have kids, I'm glad I didn't have kids back then, because I don't know how I would have made it through covering those stories. Because you don't just cover it usually you don't cover the story for a day and then move on. Sometimes you do. But some of these stories that are more intense like that, you cover them for weeks. You get to know the families. You really feel their pain and the heartache of the betrayals, the things that they have been through. And so for me, being a fiction writer allows me to tap into that because it's still in you. Our whole life experience lives in us. So what a gift that I'm able to take that and turn it into something that can maybe touch someone else's life and maybe resonate with them in a different way. And you never know what's going to speak to someone. It's been a journey, claiming my ability to tell a story without asking permission to do so. That's been a really interesting journey.
Absolutely. Rosa Linda, your books have got the perfect mix of suspense and cinematic action. If Catalina's Chronicles were adapted into a series, who would play Catalina and which director would bring it to life best?
Oh my goodness. Oh, who would bring it to life? Well, I mean, I always love like Ron Howard and James Cameron, but he's not that kind of director. I actually often think, because I do have the background as I've been a director, I've directed several short films, that I would probably have a hard time having someone else direct it. So even the process, we're having the audiobook. We have an amazing voice actress who is working through the process of recording the audiobook. And that process of having to let go of the creative control and allow that person to breathe life into the characters has been interesting. So to answer your question, I don't know. I think I'd like to direct it, but
yourself.
Who? Yeah, sure. Why not? But the actor, I would not want to do that part. So, yeah, I don't know. That's a very good question.
I think you'd be a great director. Why not?
Yeah. Well, at the very least, I would want to write the screenplay for sure.
Yeah, no, for sure. Your books are all page turners. They're full of twists. Now, if you could dare one of your readers to pay extra attention to just one tiny detail in your books because it secretly unlocks a major twist later, what would it be?
Gosh, how to give a little seed without giving away the twist. That's a tricky one because I do get like my daughter, when I read her the story, we got to this certain part and she started screaming at me and she's like, "Mommy, you can't do that to the characters." So yeah, I think that the relationships, that's my favorite part. Like the people that are coming into her life and the way that leads to things that are unexpected. I would say they matter. I'd like to believe that everyone that is in the book and every scene, it leads to new discoveries. I will say though that like this writing journey, especially the rapid release thing where I'm like, okay, I've got this book, which by the way, Death Wounds took 25 years to write, right? Because it was a screenplay and then I converted it and all of that. That time period, I became a better writer. Writing Pyro, which is the next book, I'd like to believe I became a better writer. And the third book takes all of that experience, plus all of the feedback from reviewers and beta readers and editors. And I'd like to believe that I'm a better writer now. And so with each layer gets deeper. Part of it too is that we're changing in the world. Like there's new distinctions that come our way. I mean, here I'm literally talking about a person in power who is using his power to manipulate people, right? So back when I wrote it 25 years ago, it was a very different thing than when I'm telling this story now and the continuation of that story. And what are the implications when someone who is, supposed to be protecting people is actually using it to cause harm. So yeah, I mean, I think I've evolved, and I would like to believe that it becomes even more fun as a thriller reader as you go through the series. But really, it's going to be up to the readers to decide, which is a whole different thing. It's one thing when I'm, when I was live on the air and I'm like, I'm at the scene and I'm telling these factual things. And usually the feedback I got had to do with, oh, she's a cute reporter, or, something very superficial. Very few times was it about the depth of my work. And now as a writer and writing an actual meaty book that somebody, has to spend time with and get to know your characters. Yeah, it's a very different process to have reviews about my characters and the character development and the story. So yeah, it's been very, I can't read I have my husband read my reviews because that process of like, it's just too vulnerable. So I can't.
Oh my goodness. I'm going to stay with the whole reader thing for a minute.
Okay.
What is the wildest fan theory you've ever heard about your books that actually made you pause and think, they may be onto something?
Oh, well, I don't know if it's that they're onto something. There was one thing that kept coming up again and again about two of my characters, the main character's sister and her best friend. There were several people who later said, well, I thought they were a gay couple. And they weren't. I mean, they're friends, but it was just kind of funny because I did not, when you're writing something, you don't know how someone's going to interpret it. And so that came up a few times. I think the thing that I'm finding through my writing is, because I went from a screenplay, so it's in a screenplay, which it's telling the director what you see on screen. It's all looking at the character from the outside in, and you also can have different perspectives. So you can have the perspective of what's going on with the boyfriend, or what's going on with, the sheriff. You can't do that in my books are written in first person, in Catalina Cruz's perspective. She's a young reporter, and everything is only as it relates to her and how she sees it, or if somebody told her what happened. That is a very different process, and it took a lot of wrestling with the script to convert it to only what she is thinking and the first person perspective. So I don't think I answered your question, but I do think that it just made me think, like, yeah, the process of getting inside a character's head, when I'm writing them, I see it one way. And the more that I have these beta readers, which are the people that read it at first, I call my husband and my daughters my alpha readers, because I read it to them first. When you get to the alpha and the beta and then the editors, you get feedback that tells you that these characters have taken on a life of their own. They're asking questions that do make you realize, wow, I've written certain things into her character. I actually found, I didn't realize it, but with Death Wounds, because she was a young reporter, she made a lot of mistakes, yes, but a lot of it was just kind of stumbling into the story, just reacting to what came at her. By the third book, she has matured, and this comes directly from my beta readers, because they're like, that's great that she is vulnerable, and we learned, how she interacted when she was scared and new and figuring it out, but we want to see her evolve. We want to see when she steps into her own. We want to see how she takes ownership of not just her career, but of when she's covering these bad actors. They want to see her in a stronger position, which was kind of fun now, because it changed the way that I wrote the third book, for sure.
Absolutely. Now, I know that you are a podcaster, live streamer. So if Catalina Cruz had a podcast, what would it be called, and what would the first episode be about?
It would definitely be called Catalina's Chronicles. And I struggle with that, because that's what I called this series. It's the trilogy is Catalina's Chronicles. But I think she would call her podcast Catalina's Chronicles, and she would feature some of the people from the stories that she's covering, but take it to another level. So not just what you see, the minute, 15 seconds that you see on the evening news, but then sit down with some of the key players and interview them, like you're doing with me right now, but sit down with the people from the stories, either the victims, or even get a more personal perspective from some of the law enforcement agents that she frequently talks to. Or, my favorite, I would love for her to be able to interview and sit down and talk to her videographer and her assignment manager, because Sebastian Utuado is her videographer, main one. And the assignment manager, Dino Malley, they are fascinating guys, and they have a different perspective on the story, because one is behind the camera and one is the one on the phone making the calls for her. Like, she'll say, hey, can you check out this lead for me while I'm over here live on the scene? So I think that would be a really cool show for her to interview her crew and say, well, what was your experience with this story? Sebastian in Pyro, he's right there in the trenches in a very precarious situation with her. So it'd be cool the next week for her to sit down and be like, okay, let's talk about what we went through.
That'll be fun. I think that'll be a whole lot of fun.
Right.
If you had to think about the books you've published so far, what's a scene from one of them that made you physically react while you were writing it? You know, heart racing, tears forming, body chills.
Mm.
Did you?
So
you know, can you describe one?
I can't tell you that because
Well, that's giving something away.
it was leading up to some of these scenes. I mean, I'm sure I can think of a lesser scene, but there are several scenes that I literally had my author mentors they coached me. I have a group of amazing authors that I chat with on a daily basis. And I was like, I can't do this to these characters. I can't let that, I can't have her face this. And they just said, that is fiction, and you have to go there, and you can't back down from putting them in these situations. And I had it did take me back to these TV news stories that I covered. And it did make me like, oh, I don't think I can. And there's this whole genre called cozy mysteries, which it's really, I think part of me is a cozy mystery in what I would want to read is more cozy, where like people don't really get killed or hurt, or, it's almost like Agatha Christie kind of stuff. But the fact is, my experience, what I've covered, and the reality is I can tap into this really dark side of what it's like to be a reporter. And my family, they're constantly like, my son, who's 14, he says, Mommy, why can't you write like Narnia or like dragon books or something fun, not this like murder and mayhem? And I wish I could. But it's again, it's like my therapy. Like, you get to get that out into the world, and we'll see if people actually like this stuff. But yeah, so.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Thank you so much for sharing that. Oh my goodness. So, if you had to take a year off, for example, and write an entirely different genre, what would it be? And what is the first story you think you'd like to share?
I'm actually, the next series is, I think it's close in the genre, but it's more of a pre and potentially post-apocalyptic story. It is, I'll call it near future fiction. It's actually very similar, I guess, in some ways, because it's based on events in the world now. And it is going to be centered around China and US relations. I've already written a good part of it.
Wow.
It is going to take a while to get to finalize it. And there's a lot of current events that are now changing how I'm writing it. So, yeah, it's going to be, I wish I could write dragons, but it's not in my nature. This story, the one on the China story, came when I was an anchor in Monterey, California. This was in 2003. And a story came across the desk, and it just planted the seed. And I was like, wait, how could that happen? It was some crazy human rights violation. And all of a sudden I was off to the races, and my mind starts to make up this like, well, what if this happened? And what if that happened? And next thing you know, we're moving into like post-apocalyptic, what terrible, horrible things might happen. So, so I guess the answer is that's probably what it's going to be.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Well, I'm going to throw you another curveball. If
Okay.
your life up to this point was a book, what would be the unexpected plot twist in the final chapter?
In the final chapter. I mean, the fact that I became a writer as a full-time author is a plot twist for me, leaving making fiction. But no, that's not that exciting for the outside plot twist. That's a tricky question. What would be my plot twist? I mean, obviously, the experiences of living on a boat and sailing. The pandemic changed everything.
That's very unique. Not everyone gets to do that.
And the plot twist is that I went from mainstream, working in this mainstream media, to, I was anchoring 5 shows a night in Monterey, and everything was very the biggest plot twist was when I decided to have kids. That was the biggest plot twist. But now they're off to college. One is already off at college. One leaves. She graduates this in May. But as the pandemic hit, I went from, being a full-time mom on land to we sailed full-time. We created a COVID-free fleet of kid boats, and we traveled the entire coast of the United States. We traveled to the Bahamas, and I would say that was the biggest change, going from this structured life where you kind of fit in the box and you check off all the boxes, and we're in a normal public school, landlocked life, to being almost, our kids became like wild boat kids. and so, yeah, that's a pretty good plot twist, but it really fit my nature too, because I love new adventures and exploring and meeting people. I love people. So, even in the middle of a pandemic, we made some of the best friends we could have ever wanted.
Wow, Rosa Linda, what an absolutely riveting conversation this has been. You've taken us behind the scenes in a way that few ever get to see, from real life inspirations behind your thrillers to ethical dilemmas of journalism, even the secrets in your books. So thank you so much for your candor, your insight, and for giving us a glimpse into the mind of a storyteller who doesn't just write about high-stakes drama, but has actually lived it. And to our audience, if you haven't yet done so, go grab Death Wounds and Pyro, but read with the lights on. Won't you hold up your book again? You said you've got one of the covers there, haven't you?
So this is Death Wounds. It's actually an author copy. I don't have a full copy yet because I keep giving them away. But this is Death Wounds. It's I think it's a pretty fun read, even if you might scream at me at some points. And that's the first book in the trilogy. Pyro is on pre-order. It'll come out in like 6 hours or something like that. So by the time they get to it, it may already be out. The ebook comes out tonight or tomorrow morning, and the paperback will come out on the 1st of March. And then the other book that I have is about our adventures living on the boat. That's Losing Sight of the Shore, How to Live on a Boat Without Killing Your Family. And those are my kids and my German Shepherd, Nala, who is still with us and still travels with us. And we return to the boat, by the way, in May. As soon as my daughter graduates, we'll be going, the boat is now in Turkey, and we'll be continuing the adventures. And I'll be writing from wherever we are.
Oh my goodness. Rosa Linda, I've got no doubt that this is not going to be our last conversation, and I cannot wait to see what you uncover next and have you back on the show again. So until next time, keep turning the pages and chasing the stories that matter. And to our audience, if you enjoyed today's conversation, please, please, please go and buy a copy of the books over on Amazon, and join us next time for another author sparking conversation, sparking inspiration one page at a time. Take care, everyone. Rosa Linda, thank you. joining us on Books with Brigetti. Join us next time for industry experts and award-winning authors.
I think this might be, I've been on over 24 different podcasts and radio shows in the last couple of months. And this has to be one of the most sophisticated, what the kids like to keep called bomb.com shows and presentations that I've ever been on. It's fantastic. Thank you for having me here.
Available wherever great books are sold near you.